Hello, my name is Bridget Finn. I'm the marketing director for Rockford Public Library, and today we're talking to City of Rockford Poet Laureate Jenna Goldsmith about her career as a poet and how she's enjoyed being the City of Rockford Poet Laureate halfway through her term right now.
Thank you so much for having me at the library at the Nordloff.
We always love to have you here, Jenna, and we always learn so much from you. So we wanted to talk to you a little bit today about, you and your becoming a poet. What was your journey to becoming a poet?
Well, I had a little bit of an unorthodox journey toward becoming a poet. I wasn't that kid that loved poetry. I loved to read lots of books around the house, but I wasn't writing a lot of poetry as a kid. And in fact, I kind of hated poetry in high school. And I think that that's the case for a lot of poets. If you ask them about their journey to writing, they don't necessarily have warm and fuzzy feelings about high school poetry. It wasn't until I started taking class at Rock Valley College, particularly creative writing classes, where I became really excited about creative writing. And then when I went to Illinois State University, I was sort of forced into a creative writing poetry class. It was the last creative writing class that had a seat open, and I had to take it to graduate. And I remember finding this out, of course, from my academic advisor, who is always the bearer of bad news for college students, and crying and going to the stairwell in the building and calling my mom and being like, they're making me take a poetry class, what am I going to do? And she was like, I don't know, take it, I can't get you out of this one, Jenna. So thankfully I did, because I fell in love with poetry writing. I decided to get a graduate degree in poetry writing, and it was just an amazing experience to take that class. So that's how I at least got to that moment.
That's beautiful. And then after you got your master's degree in poetry, you then went on to complete your doctorate in poetry?
I did. So I went to the University of Kentucky, where I continued to study poetry and decided I wanted to do a dissertation on three of my favorite poets. And it was very much an extension of what I started at Illinois State. I knew I wanted to continue studying those particular poets, and I had the freedom to do so there. So I was down in Lexington for 6 years working on that, and graduated, got a job out in the state of Oregon, taught literature, taught writing, and then in 2021 I came back to Illinois.
That's so great. And that's when you were nominated as our city's poet laureate. Let me ask you something. What makes a poem a poem?
Gosh, this is such a whoever came up with this question for today.
I did. I came up with
great.
the question.
Okay, well, that's fine. This is so hard. This is such a hard question to answer, because on the one hand, I could say, anything with the intention of being poetry is a poem. But I'm also very reluctant to say something like that, because there are so many formal qualities of poetry that are important to consider as we're writing. Obviously, a poem is very focused on the economy of words, image, metaphor, memory. Lots of formal technique goes into writing poetry. That's why we study it. That's why we call it craft, because there's actual, craft in the writing of poetry. So it's impossible to answer that question, although you kind of know it when you see it. You know it when you hear it. You know it when you're writing it. And I always tell my students, try. See if you can write a poem, and see what happens, see what comes out of that creative process. I heard a writer the other day, Michael Anajay, was talking about how a poem is a whisper instead of an opera, and I really loved that comparison, because a poem can be shouty. It can be shouting from a stage, but I also think a poem can be very subtle, and that's that's how I think of my own poetry, as sort of this like subtle nod to the emotion that I am trying to express.
Right. I love that. Can you tell us a little bit about your writing process?
Yeah, so my writing process is pretty the same. It hasn't changed that much from when I first started writing poetry. I've always been interested in my poetry in examining a moment that occurs to me as interesting or special in my life, and then trying to get at it from every angle. And so something will strike me as interesting, something will strike me as maybe ironic, or maybe even, sad or traumatizing or exciting, and I won't be able to stop thinking about it. And for that reason, I feel compelled to get the image on the page and then share it with others. So I will, attempt to do that in some way, and it typically takes a long time for that to grow and take shape on the page. A lot of people ask me when I know the poem is done, which is also a question that I sometimes dread, because unfortunately I have to say, like, I just do. I just know it's done. I know it's ended. The other day I was writing a poem that I'll share a little bit later about the death of one of my favorite poets. And I wrote at the end of the poem, how am I going to end this? And I realized that was the ending. I didn't actually know how I wanted the poem to end, because I was avoiding thinking about the poet's death and the end of her own poetry. So that kind of helped me shape the end of the poem, and I was pretty satisfied with how it ended, but it was challenging to get there.
Yeah. So you and I have discussed this before, and you will know when the poem is done when you know it, but generally, do you sit down and write a poem and finish it?
Gosh, sometimes I'll write a whole draft of a poem in one sitting. And typically that's like when I have had the poem in my head for a long time. Like, I've been thinking about a line or a set of lines or a set of images, and it's been up here, and I've had time to think about it and sort of turn it over like a rock in a rock tumbler, and just kind of like smooth it out over time. So sometimes that does happen, but more typically I'll write, and what comes out at the end doesn't even look like where the poem started. It'll be a different form. The lines will be different. Sometimes I'll write a poem and I'm like, this isn't working. I need to change the actual form of the poem on the page. I'll need to make the lines much longer. I'll need to cut the lines way, way back. That kind of thing.
So typically you'll write and then put it down and revisit it and refine it.
Yes.
Over time. Mm-hmm. That's cool. What do you want to see happen with your career in poetry? What do you hope to achieve?
I was just talking about this with a couple of people on a Zoom call this morning, a group that I'm working with out west. We are trying to come up with some ideas around getting out some poetry that I published last year. And as I was chatting with them, they were asking me questions about, my life here in Rockford and Poet Laureate stuff. And I was telling them about how this has just been the thrill of a lifetime. As poets growing up, we don't think that we'll have an opportunity to be professional poets, because our society doesn't really give us that option, or doesn't provide us with that narrative, right? Poets are sort of frivolous, stuff like that. But to have that opportunity to actually be a professional poet in the community, working with other people who are interested in poetry, is just, it's such an honor. And I just want to continue to do this exact thing. Even after my Poet Laureate role is up, I don't want to go back I want to keep going forward with what I'm doing in town. I also have personal goals when it comes to my writing. I have a full-length manuscript right now that I've been sending out to presses. Lots of rejections, but that's okay. That's a good thing. And I would love for that to be in print, within the next couple of years.
That's
so,
fantastic.
So that's kind of my personal goal.
Well, you have several published works already. How many chapbooks do
I
you
have 4
have?
chapbooks. 3 of them are still in print. One of them is no longer in print, and it's over. It's done. It will not be reprinted. So there's copies of it out there. I think there's a copy of it at our library, maybe. But yeah, 4 total.
Perfect.
Yeah.
For now.
For now.
And how would you advise someone who doesn't know much about poetry to begin to engage with it?
So I am a huge fan of the U.S. Poet Laureate Ada Limon. I think that she's an incredible ambassador for poetry in the United States, and her work is extremely accessible. She's often the poet that I will gift to people who both are new to poetry, but who are also experienced poets themselves, just because there is so much that she is able to do in such an accessible way to all populations. So start with Ada Limon. I feel like my little claim to fame with her, I always tell people this because it makes me feel good, but I served her coffee once.
Nice.
At a writers conference before she became the U.S. Poet Laureate, and she's so nice is where I'm going with this. She's such a nice woman. Like I said, a great ambassador for poetry. She's got several books, and she also has a lot of work that you can watch her read her work on YouTube and get a sense of her and hear her voice. But she's an incredible first poet to explore if you're interested.
It's excellent. I've learned a lot about poetry reading your work.
Thank you.
And so I think it's pretty incredible that you're the poet that's really kind of paved my interest in poetry, and I'm sure that a lot of people in Rockford feel the same way and will continue to.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we love having you part of so many classes and events here at the library. We love the way that you've engaged area writers, professional and novice, to come out and lend their voice to our community, and we're so happy to work with you as our city's Poet Laureate.
Well, it's been an honor to work with you all, and I can't wait to see what's next. Can't wait to see the new space and get in there too. So
very exciting.
Thank you. Some thoughts after I read Little Shaw's obituary of Lynn Haginian. Obituaries by poets for other poets is how it's done. Do other vocations do this, like postal workers? In lieu of flowers, send mail. Post-mortem. I read the obituary because of who it is by, who it is for, chicken or egg. It was like reading their latest publications. Post-mortem. Something weird, I thought, was she'll never have another book. Not Poor Larry Oakes or Poor Children. Her poems are over. Then, as news spreads, certain kinds of poets will post on Facebook. Another weird thought is my dissertation is not contemporary. Now, mostly dead poets. Someday, all 3 will be gone. I am rent into, am I doing this right? My favorite poet is dead. I learn a lot about her from Little Shaw's obit in Jacket 2. Her first name a shortening, last name an ex-husband's, younger than I thought, older than I thought, just human things. Next year's writing conference will be a lot of Haginian panels. This is what I have of her. Several poetry books, glimpse at the hotel bar in Oakland, names almost touching. On the conference program, 2 anthologies loose on the car floor, a whole ass dissertation. Sad, 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 sad. I'm stalling. Ending I can't push out, can't get quite right. Vestibular weakness. It always starts this way. Pull left shoulder away from left ear, depressed cranium, cradle neck, spine, skull, and neck again. Myofascial is a new word to me, muscles in the scalp. I've arrived on this woman's table, can't walk a straight line. She doesn't know I'm a poet, only that I write poems. I spin a wheel with my feet. We watch videos of her golf prodigy middle schooler on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. Never respected golf until today. He's a smart boy, she says. I say, don't send him to any university in our town, and she nods solemnly. I regret that. I'm just mad at my shoulders, slouched so long I've shortened those muscles and compressed my right rib so it sits inside its neighbor like 2 crammed siblings in a van's back seat on a family vacation. I've feared becoming my humpback great Aunt Peg, and well, here I am. Things have shifted within me. The space between my shoulder and elbow isn't as it once was. Please allow this upsetness worthy of my age.